come on.
Okay, well, Harry's getting up the chain of leadership and management, and hopefully that YouTube. There we go. While Harry's got the chain of leadership and management up, since we just got done talking about awards, let's go ahead and hand out a few that I managed to collect since we're not going to have really another division get together. So I'm going to give it to the new incoming flotilla leadership, so you have them to give out. First of all, for flotilla 6-3, where's 6-3 at? There you go. This is for George Tate. This is his service in excess of 60 vessel examinations. And this is for another one for Ms. Morelli, who I'll not make get up. This is your diploma for completing the auxiliary mid-level officers course. So here you go, Pat. So we actually got that.
That's the one that next year I want to see one for every.
Jack Whalen is 6. Jack Whalen.
This is 6-1.
6-2.
6-8.
6-8. Okay. This is Jack Whalen's AMLOC certificate as well for his graduation. So you have that. We don't have anybody here from 6-6, right?
No.
That's a surprise. Okay, I have a bunch for 6-12. So I'll tell you what, let's send out somebody over with 6-12. Would you mind? Actually, you're right here. Okay, the first thing I have is Steve Fingerhut for his third award for 750 cumulative hours sustained auxiliary service. We have Tom Burnett. This is going to be his 5 years of dedicated service as an auxiliary member, so that's a really nice one to have. Okay. Third one we have for you is going to be for Mr. Tom Paterno. This is the Auxiliary Annual Service Performance Award for 60 vessel examinations. So let me hand that to you right here as well. And I got a feeling this might be the ribbon for that first award, for the very first award.
While you're doing that, did you have a ribbon that should have gone with this?
No. And that may be that ribbon. You might want to open that one up.
I'll open this up so that ribbon is here, so let's just see.
We'll just see if that's it. And Mr. Herbert Taylor, this is going to be for excess of 30 operations hours during the year. Got you right there. And now we have an interesting one here. This is actually Auxiliary Commandant's Letter of Commendation for Mr. Michael Kappas, Flotilla 6-2. Where's 6-2 at? Kappas is the gentleman that's actually resigning from the auxiliary. So you might want to give him this is his Deepwater Horizon Auxiliary Letter of Commendation Award, signed by Admiral Nash. So I don't know if I can convince him to stay, but there it is. It only took 2 years to get those done, so there we go.
Is this a star he's after?
No, that's gonna be this one.
This one here.
I've got a whole box full of ribbons. We'll just play catch up with that, so we'll be good. Chain of leadership and management. This is an interesting subject, and I'll stand over here because I know how the camera's set.
Chuck, this middle button is the
Okay.
red light.
He's a Coast Guard blue.
Yeah, the red, the right arrow advances, the left arrow
Okay.
reverses.
The question is, can we activate that first? Let's go ahead and
Well,
advance.
if it's a link, I probably can.
Yeah, that's a link. If we can activate that link somehow. Yeah, excellent. For those of you who know Blue Mandarin, you'll understand this right away.
Right now, there is a virtually invisible network which links together millions of people who would otherwise be completely isolated from each other. This exciting technology has grown to become an incredibly complex web of connections that is so large and difficult to track that it would be practically impossible to estimate its total size. And even though most of us live alone in urban isolation, this system represents one of the few ways all of our lives are intertwined. This system is modern plumbing.
We call it the auxiliary chain of leadership.
The material that gets deposited into the system all flows in one direction, away. No matter where you are in the system, your input into it always flows away. There are, however, some exceptions. There are times when blockages or sudden pressure
This
changes
never happens in the chain of
can
leadership.
cause the flow to suddenly reverse directions. This means that the materials traveling through the system take on temporary upstreaming capability. In extreme cases, this causes the materials to push up and out through the input terminals and into the dwelling area. This kind of phenomenon is what we mean when we say that a system has become interactive.
If there was ever something that described a chain of leadership, this is it. Okay, we can go ahead and go on to the next slide here.
I never heard it explained that way before.
That's right.
Go ahead and go down. Now, we all remember the chain of leadership. We all remember, Gomer Pyle and Sergeant Carter. We have kind of an interesting situation in the Coast Guard Auxiliary because we're an interesting hybrid, especially down here in Division 6, where we have a connection between not only the chain of leadership or the non-military method of persuasion to convince other people to do things we need done, but we also have to interact with the active duty Coast Guard, don't we? Which follow a strict military chain of command. So we have this interesting cross of military people interacting with auxiliary people. So I think really what we have, especially in this region of the country, is kind of an interesting combination of I would call it the military chain of leadership, lack of a better word. But we have a hybrid scenario because we have volunteers and we have active duty, and there's expectations in how we work with and treat both these organizations. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, I got the thing right here. So systems of communications. What do we do in our system of communication? Well, if you're sitting here as a flotilla commander, you're trying to create a bunch of smiley faces, right? You need to keep your flotilla members happy, engaged, and active. But there's a span and control issue here. Because how many people can you effectively manage? Some flotillas, like, for example, 612, 63, 610, we're talking 40, 50 members of some of these flotillas. It's not possible for a division or flotilla commander to deal with this many people in any organization and know possibly what's going on with all of them. So we work in teams, don't we? We work in teams in an organization where we have vessel examination teams, people working in publications, people working in the program visitor program, people working in operations. What the flotilla commander and the flotilla vice commander really are focused on is keeping these teams of members and communicating with them within the goals of the flotilla. Now, let's see if I make this work. There we go. This is right out of the book, so we'll just kind of take it as it is. In the auxiliary, the phrase chain of leadership and management describes a system of organizational communication. Really what we're talking about is how we get the information flowing through all organizational levels of the Coast Guard Auxiliary at large. The system is kind of described as a chain of leadership and management because since we don't have military command authority, we can't, it's not like you can write somebody in Article 15 or throw them in jail for failure to follow an order. But, as I showed you in that second slide with Gomer Pyle, we live in a hybrid world down here, don't we? So when the active duty kind of asks us to do something, this is what we kind of get into. Oops. There we go. Our elected leaders must convey policy frequently, accurately, and consistently, most importantly, to auxiliary unit members. For example, the National Commodore passes down some information down to one of his area commodores. They in turn talk to like the DA Commodore, which would be Larry King. Larry King contacts me, says, hey Chuck, can you go ahead and I need this out to your district central division commanders. And hopefully we kept the same message, right? That's the nice thing about electronic communications. Unless you're editing, at least the message is the same. And eventually it gets down to the flotilla commander. The flotilla commander, as you see from me every week in my weekly reports, basically is expected to convey this information to the members. Auxiliaries are expected to use that same chain of leadership for giving and getting information. So if you have a concern about something that came down, most recently the issue regarding the member IDs, the employee IDs, and the names in an email communication, we expect the chain of leadership to come right back up. We don't expect a member to directly call Commodore Vass, right, and say, hey, I've got a problem with this, there's something screwed up in the system. We have to maintain control over the system because what happens is it becomes an unmanageable problem for anybody to deal with. All members should recognize that your elected leadership experience offers a great potential to solve these problems. Because we want to solve these problems at the lowest level. We don't want to not necessarily involve people, and frankly, in a number of flotilla issues, if the problem in the flotilla never got past the flotilla level, it's probably a good idea, right? Let's solve our own particular circumstances. Parallel staffing is very similar to this. When we talk about parallel staffing, what we're really talking about is a parallel chain of leadership or chain of command. I'm an old military guy. right? So I think in terms of chain of command, so it's kind of easier for me to talk in those terms. But if Pat has a personnel issue in Division 6, and she may come to me with it, you know, I'm not concerned about what's going on with the ATON program, other than there's a personnel problem in the ATON program. For example, somebody's sunk a boat on an ATON mission. Okay, then that's something I'm concerned about. But if it's about how to conduct that ATON mission, that's a conversation between the flotilla staff officer, the division staff officer, and the district staff officer. So the parallel chain is solving questions about how do I do my job. Whereas the elected chain of leadership is about how do I manage and run the organization as a unit, the personnel side of it. So one is management and one is basically operational. That's probably the best way to reasonably describe that. So we would expect, for example, if the FSO Public Education had a question about class qualifications or instructor qualifications, they would talk to the division staff officer, in turn to the district SCAC officer, ad nauseum, up to some branch chief someplace to get an appropriate answer in that particular situation. The elected chain of leadership really does not need to know, okay, about all these issues. However, it is very good that the vice commanders, which are your chiefs of staff, are at least courtesy copied on these emails so they know what issues are going on down at the staff. In turn, they can brief the appropriate elected leader on anything level of concern that they might want to know about. Where do the members go? Okay, people functions, right? If somebody has a problem, they go to their flotilla commander. It's a people function. My security clearance hasn't come through and it's been 6.5 years. Okay? Flotilla commander can't solve the problem internally, doesn't have the knowledge, goes to the division commander. The division commander then in turn goes to the district captain. The district captain doesn't have a clue, which, you know, in my case is probably going to happen more often than once. It's going to go to the district commodore, right? And if Larry King can't solve it, he'll bring it up to the ANACO and eventually all the way up to the National Commodore Allison, if need be. We try to solve our problems within our local chain. Program actions basically go through exactly the same way. When we talk about organizing flotillas, you know, we try to resolve the problems at the lowest level possible. We try to resolve the problems within our structure. Not always possible. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. You know, flotillas, you know, are encouraged to organize on operational areas. This has been coming out in our documentation, and more flotillas have been organizing like this. We organize the division on these basis. But really, when we're talking about flotilla parallel staffing, we're talking about recreational boating safety issues, operations and marine safety issues, and member services issues. We have 16 staff offices in a typical flotilla, of which a handful are required, generally speaking. And of course, you certainly don't have to staff all of them. You staff really what's relevant to your operation. If you, like what was said earlier today, if you don't need, if you're not going to have any publications work, you need a publications officer. So you have to kind of seriously ask yourself, especially in some of the smaller flotillas, you know, also, you know, what is absolutely required for us to do our job, and how can we best organize these things? A flotilla vice commander is not going to very effectively deal with 16 individuals, especially in a larger flotilla. So it's best if the flotilla vice commander has a conduit path to go through to deal with operational areas. Just something for consideration, and most of the auxiliary from the national level on down is kind of looking at this as a staffing structure. Now this never happens, does it? All right, what happens when the chain of communication breaks down, either in leadership or in operations? Well, the chain breaks, and people talk about, hey, somebody in the flotilla screwed up, I didn't know about what was going on here, right? You go out on a patrol, right? Something happens to the boat, people talk about, let's don't overreact, somebody's saying everything's under control, giving you the Al Haig answer, right? From back in the year. You know, these are the kind of things that happen in an organization when the people are not communicating with each other. Division 6 organized, as you can see, under Fred Steves, Doak, and Harry. So when we had our division meetings every quarter, and you know, Pat may choose to do something else or modify the structure, it's certainly up to her. We kept functions such as secretary records and finance directly under the elected leadership. We kept functions such as IS and materials under the vice. And then when we went to our division meetings, we had the 3 division chiefs speak, right? Consolidated reports. It wasn't meant to slight any of the staff officers in the situation. What it meant was we as elected leaders and chiefs of staff, again, cannot really manage very well all the issues going on in all these different program areas. You know, Pat would be very, very strong, for example, in IS, But there are other areas, for example, in communication, that she may not be that strong in. Don't ask me anything about navigation systems, but, you know, obviously I was SOOP, so I probably know something about that. So no leader is going to be an expert in all function areas that they're expected to manage. Remember, we're elected managers, we're not elected specialists. The specialists are in the staff chain. When you start climbing above, when you look at this aspect for me, we kind of go higher into the puzzle palette. We have 3 district captains. District Captain West, which is Dave McCandless now, myself in the central, and East is Mo Davis. Each one of us, West we have 2 divisions, I have 4 divisions, and Mo's going to have 3. I have a peculiar situation because 3 of the divisions I'm responsible for, we report to Sector Houston-Galveston, one of them reports to Sector New Orleans. That kind of makes it a little more curious. But the district captains report directly to the district commodore. So let's give you a personnel question, a personnel issue. Let's give you a scenario. Hey, flotilla commander, or actually flotilla vice commander, I'm trying to get an answer from the staff officer for public education, and they're not responding to me. I've tried, nothing's happening, right? Well, that division staff officer could then in turn, you know, at their own leisure, jump the chain of leadership and maybe go right to the district staff officer. You know, carbon copying the staff officer, hey, you know, you didn't answer me, I'm trying to get the answer. But what if there's really a problem down there, a personnel issue, let's say, something we have to deal with? Flotilla vice commander would then basically inform, you complain to your flotilla vice commander as your chief of staff, if you're a staff officer. The flotilla commander would then take that information, talk to the division commander, and the division commander would then go to his chief of staff, which in this case currently is Pat, right? And Pat would have the mission to go address what the issue is with that division staff officer. So you see, we jump across from the parallel chain, staffing chain, to the elected chain, the leadership chain, if there's a problem in the staff functioning, if there's something that we have to address. So it kind of goes up through the elected chain and then back down into the staff chain. Do you understand how that works? So, for example, you would not have, as a division commander, while it may be within my purview if I felt it necessary to talk to a staff officer in some way, really I would try my best absolutely not to do so. I would have Pat communicate with the staff, because that's the chief of staff's job. You know, you have to respect everybody's position in the organization, assuming that obviously they're doing their job well, which I like to believe hopefully most people want to do. When we get above the Commodores, the District Commodore, you know, District Commodore kind of has some interesting parallels here, right? So this is going to be Larry King next year. The District Commodore basically has a direct communication access to the District Commander, which is Admiral Nash, and works with him regularly. I have a direct connection to Captain Whitehead and the captain in New Orleans as well. So I can actually have a direct communication path to the sector commanders. The auxiliary sector coordinator also deals directly with the sector commander and the chief of response. So we talked about the district captain and the ASC, as we call him, Gary Schroeder in this case, are actually parallel functions. The area sector coordinator is responsible with regards to operations, where basically the district captain, my job starting January 1st, is responsible for administration and management of the auxiliary. So Gary's job is primarily to process orders, handle operations requests from the active duty, and make sure they get filtered to the correct divisions, right? So Gary gets your orders cut because that's an operations function. We don't do that as district captains. So the sector coordinator is a parallel position to the district captain at the sector level. You understand that? How that works? To get what Gary's job is versus what my job is? The reason I have 4 stripes and he has 3, and I'll just tell you up front why, is because since the district captains, our district, Captain Whitehead, has 4 stripes, they wanted to keep the auxiliaries 1 stripe level below, okay, the active duty captain. So the offices are equivalent in operations versus administration. That's just a 3-stripe job versus 4-stripe because of that particular issue. The district chief of staff deals with logistics, prevention, right, response. Any of our district staff officers who worked in district staff understand, they basically fall under one of these baskets, and we have chiefs, we have branch chiefs in charge of these different areas. So if a flotilla staff officer had a problem about marine safety, eventually it would go through the DSO, it would end up going to the branch chief of prevention, right? That would be the next stop before it went to the district chief of staff. It would go off from there. This kind of shows you kind of more directly how that works. District commander talking to the district commander, myself talking to the sector commanders. Here's the auxiliary sector coordinators, which is actually not 100% true, he's actually over here. But because of the stripe issues, I think they put it there for some particular reason. The DSO, now the DSOs, okay, and the ADSOs, for example, marine safety, have a direct chain of communication to the sector chief of prevention. And also the sector chief of response often has a direct connection to not only the DSO OP, but the staff officer for operations as well. When you work with an active duty Coast Guard station, for example, flotillas 6-4, all of our flotillas that live with the sector, basically, okay? We have a lot of the flotilla commanders. The flotilla commanders assume this role with the station OICs, don't they? Right? Nobody would expect a flotilla commander of 6-4 to go through the entire auxiliary chain of leadership to act a request of the station OIC. So there's a lot of variation in the chain of leadership and the communication to the active duty side based on what kind of unit you are and where you are located. Again, Division 6 is a hybrid. Okay, we're kind of unusual. Now, obviously, not all the Coast Guard Auxiliary lives with active duty Coast Guard, but we do. Any of the coastal units certainly do. There are units up in Dallas, Division 5, that virtually never see active duty Coast Guard, right? So for them to communicate with Sector Houston-Galveston, which controls them, on an orders issue, they have to go through their chain of leadership to make that happen. There's a kind of a difference here between what we call functional relationships and command chain of leaderships. Dotted lines typically talk to people who typically will talk to each other on a business basis. Sector commander, auxiliary sector coordinator, like we talked about before. Division commanders will talk to Gary. The flotilla commander will talk to Gary, right? I need orders for this weekend for my flotilla. I need a waiver. Something like that, right? Mr. Reynolds is sitting here in the room. I'm sure many of you in this room, if you're operationally out in operations, have had called Mr. Reynolds real quick, say, look, I need a waiver for this. I need a guest waiver, right? So there are times just out of expediency how you would do these things. But generally speaking, the ASC will be dealing with operations-related issues to the sector commander, specifically more often than not through the auxiliary liaison officer, right? Through people like Mr. Reynolds. Air Station has an auxilo. Most of your MSUs have an auxilo. All your stations have an auxiliary liaison, right? So every station is pretty much inserted a liaison officer between the active duty and you to filter and best deal with your question. So these are all people that we should be using. Here we have the parallel chain, right? The FSO, the divisions of the district, and of course the member, right? The member's first point of communication is going to be who? The flotilla vice commander, right? Because the flotilla vice commander, 8 times out of 10, the flotilla vice commander is going to be able to determine, is this something regarding a program area? They want to be trained to be a VE or maybe a publications person, versus this guy has a real problem, like he just got a DWI, it's going to affect his, his membership status. Flotilla vice commander tries to sort the issue out. If it's a further concern, it goes to the flotilla commander, and then up and down the line. Until we kind of get the answer to the system. On the same note, the division staff officer might go to the division vice commander and do the same thing, and would meet with the division commander at this level. So you kind of get an idea of how this flows. Ultimately, as flotilla commander, it all ends with you, doesn't it? The flotilla commander is the alpha, to quote, is the alpha and the omega of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Nothing in the Coast Guard Auxiliary really affects how we do our job past the flotilla commander. Okay? Well, if we got rid of everything above flotilla commander and all these flotillas were attached to Coast Guard units, we'd probably be just fine, wouldn't we? So ultimately, the responsibility is right there with the FC. You are not only expected to make sure that you properly communicate concerns going on with your unit to get resolutions to the problems, but you're also expected to be a filter point. If a communication comes down through the entire chain of leadership about, you know, waxing your boat every Thursday, and you're running a unit that has airplanes, you're probably not gonna bother forwarding that to your members, are you? So be a filter. Be a filter both ways. Try to keep the nonsense from coming up and try to keep the nonsense from coming down, right? Be a filter. Be a filter. This kind of shows you in a more confused fashion. But this is right out of the manual, so I put it in there. It just kind of shows you the interactions and the flow from flotilla staff officer to department chiefs and from the National Commodore down to the flotilla commander. And the kind of the crossover points where a staff position will probably cross over to a administrative position, an elected position. The vices or the chiefs of staff are really the glue that kind of connects the staff to the leadership. Who keeps doing this to me?
I was out on the water.
I'm telling you. Basic principle, you know, we elect our leaders and we owe them the respect of their office, the support and encouragement. Nobody wants to be flotilla commander if all they see is the flotilla commander getting beat up on a regular basis, right? They want to see, you want to see a flotilla supporting the vice and the flotilla commander, using proper change of leadership, not circumventing them, discounting their office, okay? You know, and it happens in a lot of ways, we'll talk about that, but the leadership should be expected, we should respect their office, your flotilla members should be utilizing your chain of leadership, and we should be encouraging the leaders in these elected and appointed positions to do their jobs. If they receive positive support, then through the membership, then you will get people who want to be in those jobs. As leaders, we are here to support our members, right? We try to resolve problems early. Not always easy, but you know, we try to get things done. We try to get the answers done. We try to communicate. And we should always be thanking people early and often. You hear that quite a bit, but again, that's one of our only paychecks. Is giving somebody a simple thank you for the work they did is extremely important. Is extremely important in our business. But we have this little problem, right? We have this problem especially with some past officers in the auxiliary. People who have relationships that exist outside the flotilla. Even our National Commodore, Jim Vass, and I will use him as an example, if he has a flotilla issue, he doesn't just jump to the national chain of command. He goes through his flotilla commander to resolve it. As district captain, if I have a problem with an issue in my home flotilla 610 regarding a qualification or another issue, I just don't call a district staff officer. I go to my flotilla vice commander and have them resolve the problem for me. Okay? Every leader in our organization belongs to a flotilla. So all communication regarding personnel issues or otherwise are with the flotilla commander or the flotilla vice commander. You know, if you're division commander, if you're the doggone commodore, that does not exempt you from using the chain of leadership from starting with the flotilla.
But you're going as a member of that flotilla, not as a district captain, right?
Exactly right. I'm a member, I've got a problem, I go to my FC for resolution. Even though I might end up with that communication somewhere up my chains eventually, you know, we don't jump our own chains. Now, where does this get to be a problem? This gets to be a specific problem with past officers. You know, people who've been around the system for a long time, right? People who have their connections, call their buddies. How many of us, God bless them, we all miss Captain Montgomery, but how many of us would just directly call Captain Montgomery for something, right? Well, we don't do that with the new Dirox, right? It's by the book. We just don't call Dirox for an issue. It will get kicked back to you. Why aren't you using your chain of leadership to solve this issue or problem? You know, members will get in the smoke because they've done it that way for 20 years. I know John Doe or Jane Doe, right, in this position, over I need to take care of it. That's not how you conduct business. You do not want to encourage that in your membership. It is something everybody who's in a leadership position or is in a past leadership position has to understand. Challenges, encouraging succession. I think we talked about that already this morning. Negativity.